Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 92 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. The title of today's interview is If I Knew Then, an interview with Corene Summers. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
Today's podcast guest is Corene Summers. Corene Summers is a 34-year-old wellness coach, Reiki master, and yoga instructor from Chicago, Illinois. A few days after hiking in Shenandoah in 2010, Ms. Summers noticed a tick on her stomach. She developed flu-like symptoms and a bullseye rash. She knew her rash was a sign of Lyme disease and went to an urgent care doctor where she tested positive for Lyme disease. Ms. Summers was put on doxycycline, but had an allergic reaction after 3 days and was never given any other care. She faced a slew of new symptoms. She had an ovarian cyst, anxiety and depression, digestive issues, and brain fog. Almost 8 years and 40 doctors later, Ms. Summers tested positive for Lyme disease once again, and found out that it had been the root cause of her symptoms for the 8-year period. She has since treated her Lyme disease with amoxicillin, herbal medicines, and mindful fitness techniques. Overall, Ms. Summers wants to shift her mind to that of a healthier person and knows that the rest of her body will follow. She credits Lyme disease with allowing her to transform into a stronger version of herself and started her own wellness coaching business to help other Lymies feel the same way. Hey, Corene Summers, and welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're really blessed to have you, and we thank you for coming on and agreeing to share your story with us and with our listeners.
Yeah, like I told you guys before, I'm a little nervous but excited since this is one of the first times I'm, really fully sharing the details. So thanks everybody for being here.
Corene, can you first share with us what you do for work?
Yeah, I'm a mindfulness wellness coach. I specialize in meditation as well as Reiki, and it's actually something that developed as a result of my Lyme journey. So I'm excited to share more about that as well.
And where do you currently live?
I'm in Chicago, Illinois.
So, Corene, can you now walk back to your childhood and where you grew up?
Yes, I grew up in Maryland, Maryland and Pennsylvania. So I was born in Southern Maryland, Chesapeake area. Ticks were a really common part of my childhood growing up as well. We used to play in the woods a lot, and that was the first thing we did when we came inside was to check for ticks. It wasn't too different in Pennsylvania either, Western Pennsylvania, so a little bit outside of Pittsburgh.
Do you recall having been bitten by ticks during your childhood?
Yes, actually. I was a couple of times, and it's one of those things that I think everybody wonders once you are an adult and have, like a Lyme thing happened. I had obviously later in my journey a very recognizable tick bite with the bullseye rash, but of course I've wondered, when I go back, it's like, maybe I also was bitten as a kid, and that made me more susceptible to it in the future. Who knows?
Now, do you recall showing any symptoms during your childhood, which you now looking back would think it might have been the onset of a tick disease?
Well, I always had bronchitis a lot. And so that was one of the main things I struggled with. But honestly, I was a pretty high energy kid and teenager and young adult before my real, bulk of my Lyme journey started. People were always commenting about how do you do so much in a day, and how, successful and ambitious. And, I was always balancing a lot of things and pretty high energy.
So, Corene, during your youth, what types of goals did you set for yourself, and what steps did you take to pursue those goals?
Well, I guess I had a lot of different areas that I was ambitious in. For a long time, I actually thought I was going to be a dancer, fun fact, and then I injured my knee in a skiing incident my senior year of high school. So those plans changed, and I'd grown up working in my dad's financial planning firm and was always really good at math and finance, and so I ended up in a financial services career myself as well, and working for big companies like LPL. I was a manager at Prudential. I was a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch. So I had always worked towards this really kind of high level career. I had all of my licenses, my Series 7, my Series 66, my insurance license by the time I was 21, which was pretty unheard of.
Corene, when did you first begin to show the symptoms of a tick disease?
In 2010, June, so it's weird because it's actually, this is coming right up on my 10-year anniversary. I was hiking with my partner at the time out in Shenandoah. We went to like a bed and breakfast for a little weekend getaway, enjoying nice brunches, and went to a winery and went hiking every day. And it was a few days after we got back from that trip that I found a tick on my belly. And so I was already a little startled because it was a few days after, it had been on me for a while. And then a couple days after that, I had this huge rash it was like a 3-ring rash. And so I immediately went to the urgent care where they diagnosed me on the spot with Lyme and put me on doxycycline.
So now I just want to frame this time in your life. You shared with us that you were in the financial services industry. You were this high energy gal. You had all of these licenses by the time that you were 21, and now you're 24 years old and you get bitten by a tick. What kinds of things were you involved in your life between that 21 and 24-year-old period at the time that you had gotten bitten by the tick?
A better question is, what was I not involved in? I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. So I left Pittsburgh and had my first big girl job at a firm in Washington, D.C. And I also did fundraising for charities and was very, very involved in politics. I had several board positions. I also worked on a helping women like community board. So I was involved in everything. I had so many friends. I was always busy. I had an activity, at least one, every night after work for probably that entire period of my life before I got sick. I was doing it all.
So now you're 24 years old, doing it all. You're out hiking with a partner, and you suffer this tick bite. How did your symptoms begin to develop, and how did that interfere with this vast social life that you had?
It kind of crept up on me. I think I was in denial that there was anything going on for a while, especially just because of how weird the original diagnosis was. I was put on doxycycline, and I was only on it for a couple of days, and they told me that I should be fine. I wasn't put on anything else, and I wasn't very familiar with the details of Lyme disease. I just knew, from growing up, like I said, in Maryland and Pennsylvania, like this is something I should pay attention to. I knew the bullseye rash, and it's not good to have a tick on you for a couple of days. But I was basically sent on my merry way after that. And then I had all these weird things start to pop up. Like I started getting bronchitis really bad again for long, long periods, like a month at a time. And then I had an ovarian cyst rupture. And I started to develop a lot of digestive issues that I didn't have before out of nowhere. And I was really healthy too. So I ran a lot. Like it would not be weird for me to have a 10-mile run on a weekend. And I was also really active at the gym. I did yoga. I was a vegetarian at the time, and I ate pretty healthy. So it was weird that I kept getting sick in all of these different areas to me.
So Corene, you had this tick biting you for at least several days and only were given 2 to 3 days of doxycycline before you had an allergic reaction and got no further treatment.
Correct. Felt like my whole body I had hives and was on fire.
And then at that point, your doctor said, you don't need to take it anymore and you're going to be fine and you won't be sick anymore. Is that what happened with your doctor?
Yeah, and to be honest, it was a little hazy. I mean, I'm 24, like I explained to you, I'm like the picture of health for the most part, and I didn't even have a primary care doctor at the time. I had never really even used my insurance. So I went to the urgent care, and I don't even remember like which urgent care I went to. They weren't making a big deal of it. It didn't seem like it was something that was a serious concern.
And you got sick pretty quickly after this, again, after the 3-day treatment. Did you ever think back maybe this was associated with your tick bite and the short course of doxycycline you were given?
Honestly, no. It's weird to me now that I didn't think of it before, that it took until 2018 to put all the pieces of the puzzle together.
And that was 8 years later, right?
Correct. Yeah, 8 years, full 8 years.
So Corene, as your symptoms are beginning to develop, how is it impacting first your professional life? Is it having an impact on your capacity to perform at work at a high level?
Yeah, I would say especially starting around, a couple years after this. It was 2012 that things continued to get worse and worse and worse. And I ended up, going to the doctors to seek more and more answers. It was past the point that I could ignore it anymore, and it was starting to impact my job, my energy, my emotions, being sick day after day after day, I was dealing with a lot of digestive issues. And so it was really starting to wear me down. And at that point, I really lost a lot of energy for work. I was still succeeding, and I prioritized it probably at the expense of my own health during that time. I think when you're dealing with these issues that are a mystery, it's really easy to think, oh, I just need to suck it up. Everybody, other people feel this way, and I just need to keep going. And I actually think at the level that I kept going hurt me and prevented me from healing.
So, Corene, let's talk about the challenges that you were having in the healing journey. Were you able to socialize at this very high level where you are now going out every single night during this 21 to 24-year-old window? Did that begin to slow down?
Yes, definitely. The time in Seattle, things really started to shift. And I struggled a lot with loneliness as I kind of withdrew from my social experiences. And it was because I quickly became very limited in what I could do. I didn't have energy a lot, and I only had energy to do my job. And I felt, really tied to being successful there. And it was important to me. And so I put so much energy into my career and my relationship at the time. And I started to lose the energy for anything else. And I was also really confused. I had no idea what was happening to me. I had about a dozen diagnoses, and nothing was making sense. I got a different answer every time I went to the doctor, and my family members were asking questions. My friends would ask questions, and I didn't have answers. And I don't know, I think it made me feel ashamed a little bit, and just it was just so confusing. It was like, how do I not know what's going on with my body? And so I started to withdraw quite a bit around that time.
So now as your work-life balance begins to now tilt almost entirely towards work, where you're putting all of your energy into work, how do you start to change emotionally? Meaning, what kind of stories are you telling yourself, and what kind of doubts are beginning to creep into your head?
It was a lot of fear. For all of you out there suffering with a tick-borne illness, I know that you know what this is like to not know and not be getting answers and to feel unsafe. That was really what it was. I didn't feel safe, and nobody could give me any kind of answers. It seemed, it was like, oh, I'm just going to have every time I go to the doctor, there's going to be something else wrong. And I wasn't receiving a lot of compassion in the medical field as well. It just feels like you're being passed off from one person to another to another. They're always losing my medical records. It was very isolating. And I had luckily gotten some really good advice from a doctor early on that said I had to be an advocate to myself, and that I could easily get lost in the medical system, and that the most important thing I could do was to advocate for myself. And I think that's probably, even though I was mad at her at first when she said that, because I didn't think it should be right or how it is, that's probably what really pushed me towards my inner journey, my inner healing journey, which has been so important to my overall healing.
So now these fear loops that you found yourself in, did that have an impact on the people in your life? Were there people who were just tired of you not upholding your side of the social equation? Were there people who, no longer wanted to interact with you because they were sick of you being sick? How is this impacting you in your social circles, in your social contacts?
Yeah, and I became really flaky. I would bail on stuff at the last minute, and I didn't always have answers, and people get tired of that, even if you're not feeling well. And I wasn't comfortable really talking about the deep details of what I was going through and all these different diagnoses, because I just it felt like this mystery. I still wasn't getting the right answers. So it pretty significantly started to impact my friendships and my relationships. I lost a lot of friends.
Corene, you mentioned that over this 8-year window from 2010 to 2018, you had some misdiagnoses by various doctors. Can you describe for us what those misdiagnoses were?
Yes, and I don't know which ones were misdiagnoses and which ones were real, but I had that ovarian cyst rupture, I had candida and parasites and IBS and H. pylori, all of these gut issue dysfunctions. I also had hepatitis and Epstein-Barr, and lots of severe chronic bronchitis, allergies, psoriasis, the arthritis. well as anxiety. I was depressed. I had brain fog, about 50 different food sensitivities, some chronic cysts. I ended up with some lymph and other skin issues.
So Corene, most of these problems or symptoms that you were having aren't really related. Some are, but some aren't. So how are your doctors explaining
Correct.
that these were all related? Were they, or are they just saying we have no idea why you're having such a wide variety of symptoms and we can't pinpoint the real root cause?
Well, I also moved several times during this period. So I had doctors, and I think part of it is that nobody was really communicating with each other, and my medical records were getting lost all of the time. And I had doctors in Washington, D.C., in Seattle, Washington, and then I moved to Chicago. So I was seen by, I think I was at 5 different hospitals total, as well as other specialists and some private, practices, different primary care physicians. So it was also a wide circle of people that were looking at what was going on. And like I said, I kept having to transfer my medical records, so that didn't necessarily help the situation. Once they determined that it was chronic Lyme, they put all of these pieces of the puzzle together in that my immune function was so weakened, it's really easy to get sick in other ways.
Corene, do you think that part of the problem is that a lot of these doctors and the hospitals and these specialists were just focusing on their niche or their specific part of the body and weren't taking a holistic approach, a whole body approach, and that's why they couldn't piece everything together to say this is a systemic, body-wide problem?
Yeah, I definitely think that's, you go from one specialist to another. Once I had the digestive stuff was, I spent a long time seeing different gastro doctors. And then, it took so long for me to get to an infectious disease doctor. I'd seen so many different types of specialists, and they aren't often speaking to each other. And that was why I started to seek a holistic approach, because it takes the whole body, the whole mind, every part of our story into consideration. I also, I can't help but blame myself sometimes too. It's like, I don't know why I didn't remember the Lyme disease thing. I had the rash and everything. I had the diagnosis and everything. So I wonder sometimes, was it my fault that I didn't bring that up? How did I not think of that? When that was finally mentioned, and it was by a doctor that did not know that part of my story. And my whole body melted in that moment, because I realized, oh my God, you had the answer the whole time.
Don't you think that kind of doubt is exactly what happens when you have Lyme disease? You begin to doubt yourself in every way, and then you beat yourself up when you finally get to the point where you have a diagnosis?
Yes, I know that I'm not unique in that part of my journey. We all get into this place where we beat ourselves up a little bit, and it's difficult.
When you're going through this journey with going from doctor to doctor and hospital to hospital, how much of your care is being paid for with insurance, and how much out-of-pocket expense did you have to incur?
I was really, really lucky, to be honest. I had incredible insurance working in finance during this time, and I was really lucky to have a lot of it taken care of. I definitely spent my entire deductible every year. I have every year. Even last year, I ended up in the emergency room at the beginning of the year, and that paid my whole deductible by January 15th. So I had a few $1,000s every year for my deductible, but a lot of my medications were covered. The hepatitis situation, I know, is especially unique in my case and not really related, except that most people at my age fight it off. I have a lot of tattoos, and that's what the doctors pinned that back to. But because my immune function was so weak at the time, they're saying you can't fight anything off. And that was about $500,000 worth of medication to be treated for that. And I had to take some time off work a couple of different times through my journey, but then especially. And I only paid, a few $100s. I look back at that and I cry sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I was taken care of in that way. So I've been really lucky. I know many are not. Where I spend my money is on my holistic care.
But Corene, do you think that perhaps there may have been a downside to having the level of insurance coverage that you had? And this is a unique question for us here at Tick Boot Camp, because with almost everyone else that we've interviewed in the past, they haven't had adequate insurance coverage to provide for the care that they needed. I'm just wondering, and I'd like to explore this with you. Do you think maybe you stayed in the traditional system longer because you had such good coverage, and that maybe if you didn't have that coverage, you would have gone to the alternatives that ultimately allowed you to be successful on this journey?
Yes, that's probably true. And I know I did end up staying in finance way longer than I wanted to. 2012, when I moved to Seattle, I started a job in finance there, but I also started my first yoga and meditation teacher training, which is something that I had started to really, want to shift into at that point. And because of my health scares, I was really afraid to leave that job. It took me a lot longer to make the jump to the wellness coaching side of my journey than I think it would have if I hadn't had that safety net.
So now, Corene, 8 years into this journey, how did Lyme come back into the equation? Was it you or a doctor that finally thought maybe this is all just chronic Lyme?
So this is the interesting thing. Because of, the prior, the digestive issues that I was diagnosed with when I was in Seattle, the hepatitis and the psoriasis and the food sensitivities and all these things that were popping up, I had gone on a really, really clean diet. And I had basically stripped like everything processed. I didn't drink for 2.5 years. I cut everything out of my diet. I went really strict. I was doing like bone broth. I was making all my own food from scratch. I put a lot of time into that and just some other holistic things. It was also when I was really getting deep into my meditation practices and yoga and other holistic, just natural ways of living and being. And I got really into it. And that was probably like 2013, 14, and I continued to get more and more dedicated to those practices and to the way I was eating and caring for myself. Then, so flash forward, I moved to Chicago. I'm in Chicago. This is when I find out or when I'm trying to get treatment for the hepatitis, because I was denied for treatment twice because I didn't have enough cirrhosis of my liver, which is a fun fact that can happen. I had to fight with insurance companies for a couple of years to actually get approved to be treated for that. So when I was treated for that, they told me that wasn't what was wrong with causing all my other problems. And so I thought I was going to be better. And so I went back to more of a normal, I started living again. I made some new friends. I went out to eat again. I would have wine from time to time. I started to just live like a more of a normal life. And then I started to get sick again. And I started falling out of crow pose in yoga and I started falling when I was walking down the street. My joints were giving out. I had this just cascade of problems about a year after I started to go back to living more of a real life. And it was then that I realized how much my holistic practices has actually been keeping me well, and that meant there was still something under the surface. And that was when I went back to the rounds of doctors.
So Corene, I'm finding your healing journey to be really interesting in that as you're getting sicker and sicker and you're becoming socially isolated and you're having challenges at work, you are still taking on a new activity and you're beginning to study yoga and meditation and these other practices. How did you find the energy to move into that arena when all the rest of your life was beginning to become more and more isolated?
Well, I was home alone all the time. I read and I studied, and it was more it really shocked me to be as sick as I was, as young as I was, when I had always been so healthy. And I probably became a little bit obsessed with just getting back to feeling good again.
And why did you think your answers would be found in that area of study?
Honestly, it was just this gut feeling. It was just a feeling I had, like a pull towards this way of life. And I, for some reason, just thought that the answers were going to be there for me. And it was because I had experienced the physical changes in my mind and body by practicing these things. Like I was seeing it in real time that they were helping me.
So do you think that you were being spiritually prepared for the journey that you were about to go on?
Oh my gosh, I had no idea the journey I was about to go on. I mean, you look back and you put all these things together and it's like, crazy for me sometimes to think about it. I don't wish Lyme on anybody, and there are so many days that I wonder why I have to go through this. But then, because of the way it actually transformed my life and what I got into and leaving finance and doing this coaching now and helping myself and being able to help others is one of the most rewarding parts of my life. And so I guess I'm glad if I had to go through something like this, now I'm able to help others, and it's helped me, and it's not perfect, but it certainly has made me stronger.
So Corene, you now finally get your hepatitis treatment. You think that's the root cause of all of your symptoms. You start to relive your life again, and then you get really, really, really sick, and it continues to worsen. And this ultimately leads you up to your final chronic Lyme diagnosis. So how did that diagnosis occur?
So I was seeing a few different sets of doctors. My approach has always kind of been, and this is probably because of peer pressure also from my family and other loved ones, but it's like, you have to go to the Western doctor and your Eastern hippie doctors. That's basically what my parents have said. So, I take the two, and I want to know, I think diagnostic testing has obviously its time and its place, and didn't help me a lot along this journey, but I thought it was, important to get two sets of opinions. And so I was I got to I actually ended up getting into an infectious disease doctor. But the thing that happened first was that I saw a doctor who did what's called nutrition response testing. It's basically nervous system testing, and they basically compare your nervous system response to different toxins as well as different high dose nutrients, and kind of analyze where your body then has either it is missing something or it has something toxic in it that's reacting to this. Really fascinating process. She's the one that told me that after we finished this testing, which I thought she, was going to be something like digestive, whatever, something minor. And she looked at me knowing nothing about this part of my history, and she says, "You have Lyme disease." And I remembered that my tick bite instantly, of course. I was like, oh my gosh, this actually puts the pieces of the puzzle together. And so, so that pushed me back into, I went to get the second opinion at the hospital here in Chicago and saw the infectious disease doctor. And I only did the Western blot, which did come back negative. They told me that I would probably have results if I did further testing, and the name is slipping my mind right now, of the one that goes really deep.
Was it through a lab like IGeneX or DNA Connection?
IGeneX. Yeah. I was told that I should do that, and I just chose not to spend the money because I had a really good infectious disease doctor who looked me in the face and said, even though this particular test came back negative because of, X, Y, and Z, she actually was really good. Like, she knew, hey, there's a lot of failures in testing, especially after a journey like you've had. Your symptoms, your testing, and your story are enough for me to say that you have chronic Lyme. I will only be able to put you on more antibiotics through your insurance company. That's all they're going to improve in terms of taking action. But you're doing a really good job of managing your symptoms on your own, and one of your best chances of putting your symptoms into bigger remission is to actually continue to seek holistic care.
So Corene, was it two different doctors? It sounds like there may have been a first doctor who did this autonomic response testing for your nervous system, and then you went to an infectious disease doctor to follow up with the Western blot, which was negative, but then that doctor still said, you know what, you still have it, and we should continue on the path that you're on. Was it two separate doctors or just the one infectious disease doctor?
Two.
And what was the first doctor? Was that a naturopath? What type of doctor was that?
A naturopath who also does the nutrition response testing is a separate certification as well.
So for our listeners who are interested in this type of testing, what would you recommend they do to try to find out what doctor they can see to get this test to see if they have Lyme disease based on other negative tests that they may have had?
I would look up I would look up NRT in your area, find someone who is certified to do that kind of testing. So you could search NRT, nutrition response testing, nervous system response testing, Sometimes chiropractors, it's usually in the holistic spheres that you find it. So naturopaths and other types of, holistic care and chiropractors as well sometimes have that certification, I've noticed.
So now that you have this confirmation from a naturopath and an infectious disease doctor that although you had a negative Western blot, you still have chronic Lyme, and they were encouraging you, rightfully so, to follow down this holistic path to heal, what were your next steps now to aggressively treat yourself in the holistic arena?
Well, the first thing I did was go back to I did a lot of research and met with several different holistic doctors on different diet things, but I cut out alcohol again, as well as all processed foods, sugar, dairy, and gluten. So I went completely dairy-free and gluten-free, sugar, like all of it. So that was one of the first things. And then I started this huge, I started a detox program, and gosh, I really did so many things at that point. I just kind of went all in. It had been exactly 8 years. Once I felt like I had that last piece of the puzzle, it's like, okay, I know what I have to do now. They're telling me I'm going to have these symptoms forever. And I wasn't willing to accept that. And what I know about health from, my studies in mindfulness, meditation, and Ayurveda, I believe the body has the ability to heal if we put it in the right conditions. In our modern world, we're not being served those right conditions. Our brains are too active and overstimulated from technology. We have a very, polluted environment. Our food is toxic shit. You go to the grocery store, I can only shop in like 2 aisles in an entire grocery store. And I just think about how many people are out there putting their bodies not in the position to heal through the way that, just again, our natural environment is. Everything that you buy at the store in a bottle is full of toxins when you actually start to look into it. And those things are slowly poisoning our bodies. So I went like deep dive. I don't use any toxic chemicals. I haven't used things like deodorant and face wash and all that in like 5 years. I use all like natural products. And then I also, I did the right therapies with like a lot of supplements. So I first had to handle a lot of the digestive things. I was doing digestive enzymes and oregano oils and all kinds of different supplements. I had 20 pills a day I was taking for a while, and I was sleeping a ton almost that entire summer, and started sound healing. I continued with Reiki, yoga, meditation. I did cryo and infrared sauna, which is one of the therapies that I really believed in. Basically, if you could, anything holistic I could find, I started to implement into my routines.
So, Corene, as you started to go down this path, I'm wondering how your family reacted. You said your family wanted you to go both to the traditional doctors and your hippie doctors. Now, it's clear you're now going the hippie path. So how did your family respond to that?
Well, they're really supportive of me now because they see that I'm feeling better than I have in a really long time. So I think, as I continue to heal and grow stronger, and I'm still able to work, and I know so many people that are suffering out there have a much worse situation than I've been dealt, or are unable to work or unable to get themselves back into a place that they can function in society. And so I think, with my family and my friends, seeing me kind of come back to life a little bit and have strength and energy, and they're convinced.
Well, Corene, but I'm not really asking you how everyone's reacting to you now. Clearly you're healthy, clearly it's worked. I'm asking you how your family reacted to you when you were making the decision, because you suggested earlier they were okay with you going down the hippie path, but they really wanted you to take the traditional approach as well. And I think it was very brave of you to make the pivot from traditional to alternative. And I'm wondering whether or not you were fully supported when you were making that decision initially.
No, I was not fully supported. I also stopped involving other people's opinions. I realized that I have to follow my own true north on this. And part of my mindfulness training and teaching and coaching is connecting with what we believe is best, which only we know, only you know truly what is best for you. And only you can make that decision. Two people will look at one situation and see two completely different things. We have to be able to step outside of fear. We have to learn how to trust ourselves. And I think we really need to let go of the expectations and opinions of others. They don't get to decide.
So I understand that you now have a framework that you're teaching others, but I'm asking you, how did you find that framework?
How did what?
How did you find that framework? And how did you find the strength to now finally listen to your own body rather than allowing other people in your life to influence how you should move forward?
It was because I had experienced it so vividly in my own body. My experiences in India and Nepal and going through my trainings. And once I could feel the difference in the way my mind and body were working, it was easier for me to buy in.
Corene, let's talk about some of the treatments that you did, because there are a lot of interesting ones I know many of our listeners are going to be interested in. The first one is cryotherapy. There's a lot of talk about cryotherapy to help treat many chronic illnesses. So how did that work for you, and what was it like?
It's so cold. It's freezing. And it actually was exhausting the first few times I went through the process. I did a little research. So first, a place opened here in Chicago that called Freeze and Float that a few different people had recommended to me. They do both. They do the infrared, they do cryo, they have float tanks, and it's a really nice holistic services. And so I had a few people recommend this to me, and I looked into, I don't remember what I was Googling and researching exactly, but cryo and sauna and infrared for Lyme to see if there was any research out there on it. And I found a couple of different articles, one in particular that broke down that you should do the infrared followed by the cryo, because one of the problems I had doing infrared on its own is that I get really sick after. I mean, I know, a lot of you out there that have tried this and probably say the same thing, like the detox impact when stuff is coming to surface. When we're detoxing, when we're bringing this stuff to surface, we're going to feel it. That's just unfortunately, part of the process. And so with infrared, it mobilizes all the bacteria and brings it to the surface. And then supposedly the cryo, if you do it right after, freezes it off. And I'm not a doctor, so, I'm just putting out there what I researched and found and decided to try for myself. And it was still tough, but I had a way better experience doing those two back to back than I had when I was doing infrared by itself. The more regular you are, the better it works as well.
There are various ways people do this type of therapy. So what was it like for you using this facility? Was it an ice bath?
Yeah, you can do the facial is one version. I did the full body cryo. So it's like this circular cylinder tank, and you get in naked. You have just gloves on and socks on, and you spin in circles for it's only 3 minutes, and you spin in circles the entire time, and then that's it. And it's really cold.
Do you get any herxing effects from cryotherapy?
Well, that's what I was saying. The herxing was way less when I combined the cryo with the infrared, for me at least. Now, when I first started, it was still, the first few times I still had a pretty big herx impact, but then the more I was doing it, it felt better and better.
Is it something that you've been doing on and off over the last 2 years? Because you got officially diagnosed with chronic Lyme 2 years ago, and you've been treating since then. So is this something you did consistently for a while, and now you're doing on and off?
Yeah, I've actually only been doing that since last summer. That's one of the newer therapies I've introduced.
Is this something that you would recommend to other Lymies who are looking for something to help them feel better and advance their healing journey?
Yes, I definitely would. And look, I think, each of our journeys, it's important to remember that each of our journeys are unique, and it's important to find what works for you. So give it a try, see how you feel.
Another therapy you mentioned that sounded really interesting was sound therapy. So can you talk to us about what that was like, how it was administered, and how it helped you?
Yes. Everything in the world is made of energy and has a vibrational frequency. This is how I look at the world from my perspective of Reiki and, the energy and meditation practices that I've studied now for so many years. And we each have our own biomagnetic field, which, like all energy, it's not static. It can be manipulated. It can change. And so we can use tools like our breath, even like, certain breathing techniques. We can use Reiki, we can use meditation, and we can use sound. The sound is actually very, very effective. It's a literal vibration that creates a change in your own electromagnetic field as you experience it, putting you into an optimal state to heal. It can be, sound can be used, to detox certain things. Each note is connected to a different part of our brains. And it's another one of those things that's unique. Your brain might respond to 3 certain frequencies differently than Rich, Matt, and differently than me. But for one person, they might hear it might release stress or create a deep healing vibration. For someone else, it might create joy or a sense of peace. So I do highly recommend that you guys look into, a yoga studio near you or someone that's doing some kind of sound healing. And at the very least, you're going to feel really relaxed and like super calm after.
We've actually had other guests who have used sound therapy, and I said the same thing, that it induces this very relaxed sense of being. And for our listeners who want to learn more about this, where do you actually go to get this sound therapy?
Well, you can go, a lot of times yoga studios will have someone that plays sound bowls and like they'll do occasional events. I have my own sound instruments now. So you can also buy like a Tibetan sound bowl for a pretty decent price, especially what most people are spending on their treatment. Anyway, it's like you can get your own sound instrument for, between $50 and $150. So you could get one of those Tibetan sound bowls. I also have these tuning forks, the solfeggio frequencies. So it's 9 different tuning forks, and you hit it with like a little gong, and you hold it up to either of your ears, and it creates, a certain vibration. Each one of the 9 forks connects to a different part of your brain or body, or has a different purpose. So I've been having fun playing around with those as well. I just got those about 6 months ago.
Corene, the sound therapy, is it enhancing the immune system, or is it actually going after the bacteria and killing the bacteria with these frequencies?
With all of these holistic practices, I think we need to think of it as supporting our immune system to rid itself of the bacteria, or to at least put the symptoms in remission. Our brains, our bodies are incredibly powerful, and if we, it's mostly about supporting the immune system and giving the body the conditions that it needs to do the other healing work. It already knows how to heal. I do believe that. I do believe that it knows how to heal. Our bodies know how to heal. They know how to rid ourselves of harmful toxins, but we're often not in the right condition to support that. And so the best thing that we can do when we're dealing with these chronic issues that have a lot of mystery and not a lot of tangible, advice, it's like, I'm sure the supplements that I've taken, are different from what most everybody else, we can't always compare those things. What we can all do is work to put our bodies in the best condition possible to heal. And that's by these activities that, 1, reduce stress, because that's really important. If we're going around in this fear-based stress, we're in fight or flight all the time. We're not in the condition to heal. Our nervous systems are out of whack. So this is calming the nervous system, reducing stress, and then also supporting strengthening the immune system, strengthening brain function, and strengthening gut function. Those are things we can all work on.
Corene, on the note of reducing stress, because many Lymies are stressed. It's a constant emotional roller coaster. And in your pre-interview questionnaire, you mentioned that you have done things like herbs and adaptogenic herbs. So can you talk to our listeners about what these adaptogenic herbs are and how they have helped you specifically?
Yes. So I actually use a complex mix. Actually, there's 4 of them from one of my favorite brands called Coco Glow. And I'm happy we can maybe send some follow-up information out about them if you guys are interested, because taking that daily supplement has absolutely changed my life. They're like woman-owned business out in Portland, and one of them, they're Chinese herbalists, and one is an acupuncturist, and they developed these 4 different mixes for different purposes, and you can use them. They're really easy to use. This is what I like the most, and I recommend them to my clients all the time as well, because 1, you could put in like tea or coffee. 1 you can add to, and it's like cocoa-y and cinnamony. 1 you can put in your smoothie. One is like a bone broth, but they're all vegan. And I don't know, the list is, they have like 30 different Chinese herbs and adaptogens in each one. But overall, they do all those things I was just talking about. Detox, gut and digestion, brain power, also reducing stress. There's something I would highly look into. CBD, I use a physician-designed CBD as well, called Synergy Bio Naturals. And if people are interested in either of these, I have discount codes as well, and you guys can get a discount on their products. But they've been really helpful. And the CBD includes other adaptogens in it too. One of them is with ashwagandha, and one of them, I think, rhodiola.
So Corene, we're going to put a link to your Instagram profile as well as all of your links that you have, so our listeners can go and find you and contact you about all this great information that you provided. And one last thing I want to ask you about your treatment is you mentioned that you used a lot of Ayurvedic techniques. So can you describe for listeners what that is and also how to properly pronounce it?
Yes, Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is commonly known as India's holistic medical system. But it takes into mind, it kind of categorizes people into these 3 mind-body types, and then analyzes how to it's all about bringing your body back into balance. So it's going back to those same things I was talking about. They use a word called ojas, and it's about strengthening your vitality and your immune system and getting to the root of disease. So looking at, where the original root of disease was and supporting the body from that root cause. They say it always starts in the gut, actually. That's where kind of the root usually is, when our gut function creates the environment that, everything else can start to go, metabolic function and immune and everything else. I just did a Panchakarma, it's their 23-day detox program. And I would highly recommend that folks look into that, because it's a really deep detox that can give you kind of a great starting off point to then implement some of these other holistic practices.
So can you talk more about what Reiki, am I saying that correctly, what Reiki is and how it has helped you?
Yeah, so Reiki is another energy technique. I'm a Reiki master myself, so this is something that I practice on myself and also use with others. But similar to music and sound therapy, what we're doing is we're shifting the vibration or the frequency of the electromagnetic field. Generally speaking, it's a Japanese relaxation practice. So it's, again, going to support you in stress relief. And when we reduce stress, we put our bodies in the best position possible to heal.
So for you, Corene, looking back at your journey over the past 2 years of now treating chronic Lyme from a holistic perspective, what would you say was the one thing or the group of things that has worked best for you in your experience?
Well, first, the work I did with my NRT, which I know I didn't get into a lot of details about the specific supplements and different things, because those are very unique to each individual. And, I do think that you should seek a specialist in that area so that it can be tailored to your body. And it was constantly changing as my body was healing and developing. So starting out therapy with her was really, really critical to put my body in the best position for these other therapies to then work. The Cocoa Glow Chinese herbs and adaptogens, the cryo and infrared, and like the sound and Reiki, those made the biggest differences for me.
So over the past 2 years, you've come a really, really long way from where you were 10 years ago. What would you say, percentage-wise, you are today, how much you've restored your health?
Well, sometimes that answer varies day by day. I would say 75, 70.
So Corene, I think you've made one of the most interesting transformations of anyone we've ever interviewed. It seems to me that you were born and bred
Oh, wow.
a financial services professional, and you followed this path that looks like was created for you by your family, and you became this very successful financial services professional working in many cities, making a lot of money, and now you're what your family would probably describe as a hippie practitioner. So talk Talk to us about that transition and how your Lyme disease journey brought you from this high stress, high intensity financial professional to now being a gal who's a healer.
Gosh, you know, if somebody told me this would have been my life, I would have never believed them. So it feels more like I'm watching a movie of somebody else's life sometimes, like looking back, like, wow, all of these things came together that somehow put me on this path. Somehow this journey has opened up a total new avenue for living and for me. And it brought like hope back into my life and love back into my life. And I wouldn't change it for anything. I'm so glad that if I had to go through all of this, that at least now I'm able to continue to grow stronger and to support others. I think that's the biggest thing. And that's where I feel the most blessed in my life as a whole. I wake up every day feeling grateful that I get to do something to serve others and maybe put their path on, into a little bit of a brighter spot, or offer them something from, my journey and my story that can help them too. Because that was really why I became so obsessed about this stuff. It was like, I want to share this. I know there are so many other people that are struggling and suffering and not getting the answers that they need. And we have so much power within ourselves and within our minds and bodies. And we do have, even when it feels like, I know that for everybody out there that's struggling with Lyme, you feel out of control. Your life feels like it's out of control and like there's nothing you can do sometimes. And, I guess it was almost selfish. Like, no, we do have control. Take our power back. There are things that we can do. And I felt really empowered in that when I started to see changes and shifts in my mind and body. And I still have really hard days, but I feel like I have the tools I need to get myself back into harmony and back into balance and back on track. And that's what feels good. So if I can offer, any last words of advice, guys, just keep on your journey and don't give up on yourself. And you've got to trust that you are going to make the right decisions for you.
So, Corene, you've developed frameworks professionally that allowed you to get your body and your life back in harmony and back in balance. If folks wanted to reach out to you and work with you, how would they find you, and what types of services could you offer to our listeners?
That's a great question. Thank you. I would be honored to support and help anybody, listening to this that I possibly could. If you're interested and you want to learn more, you can schedule a free intro session with me on my website, which is artisanpharmacy.com. And that's spelled artisan, ARTISAN. And pharmacy is spelled like a farm, SARMACY. So kind of recognizing like we have all of these things within us and in our environment that we can use to heal. And so I do one-on-one wellness coaching to support others who want to learn these same practices. I like to do a 12-week program where I teach you as much as I possibly can of how to apply these things to your own life. Because again, we're all really unique and the same thing doesn't work for everybody. So it's all about tailoring it to fit your life, your schedule. And I'm happy to offer a 50% discount to our Tick Boot Camp listeners. So if anybody, like I said, just go on my website, schedule that meeting with me. You can check me out on Instagram under the same name.
Thank you for listening to the Tick Boot Camp interview with Corene Summers. To our listeners, we have a call to action. First, if you'd like to learn more about Corene Summers, please visit our Instagram page at Artisan Pharmacy. Second, if you enjoyed this episode of the Tick Boot Camp podcast, please share it with your friends by using the social media buttons you see at the bottom of this post. Third, we here at Tick Boot Camp have created a Tick Bite blueprint that has been inspired by the information that has been shared with us by past podcast guests. We urge you to visit our website at www.tickbootcamp.com to view the blueprint. We would appreciate it if you would contact us with any suggestions you have for improvements. Fourth, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify to get the automatic episode updates for our Tick Boot Camp podcast. And finally, we thank you, our listeners, for your comments on our past podcast episodes. Please take a minute to leave us an honest review on iTunes, on Instagram, or on our website. We make it a point to read every single one of the reviews we get. Thank you for listening.